So, we have understood how to pass values into a list and what are the possible methods over a list, how to add elements, how to remove elements. Now, the next type of sequence or the container type which we are going to discuss is tuples. So, what makes a difference between tuples and a list? Let us make it simple by just understanding it, because tuples are also a collection of elements, but we enclose them in parentheses, or you just make it as round brackets, because basically tuple is a Python sequence where we store a group of elements. It can be of same type or different type, but the main difference is tuples are immutable. They are similar to strings. That is the reason if once we create a tuple, we cannot modify them, and same indexing and slicing are possible. We can store different type of elements, because let me prove it practically by opening my IDLE and just making it simple for you, then you will understand. So, even I try to save it, and because I just wanted to pass the same attachments for you, whether you follow the same steps, so it is easier for you, because basically when we go for tuple, I always try to write comments, because when you are when you are into developer role, when you work yourself, you should make sure that writing comments is the best way, because once you write comments, people will easily understand, because tuple is basically, it is usually a collection of heterogeneous type or homogeneous type. It is basically, it is usually a collection of elements or items, whatever we say, whether it is same or different. That is simple, but enclosed within parenthesis, enclosed in parenthesis, that is round brackets, right. How do you separate that? What happens if you write like this, a is equal to 1, 2, 3? You treat that as numbers, right? There you are wrong, because if you give type of a, it is no more a number, but it is a tuple, because generally tuples are represented in this way. This is called as an empty tuple. The only difference is tuples are immutable. That means once you have created a tuple, you cannot change it. So, let us understand it more detail, but what happens if I try to give like this 10 comma, what happens if I try to leave it? You see, when you print type of a, always check the type. When you give type of a, why you are getting? Because you gave comma. So, when you try to create multiple elements, you generally separate them with commas. So, that is the reason. Just make it simple. When you are writing commas, that is not at all an integer, but it is a collection of elements where you pass them. That is the reason. Why should I write only same type? What happens if I write different types? Only relate yourself. Only practice only makes you better. You see, the result is in parenthesis, whether it is of same type or different type. Then what makes tuples different from lists? There you go. Suppose, anyways the indexing is same. First let us go for a of 1. What is a of 1? A of 1 is 2. What happens if I try to change it to like this? If I try to give Codegnan, there you go. Tuple object does not support item assignment, because clearly tuples are immutable. That means if you don't want to change your data, then you can clearly create a tuple, because we generally create tuple, we generally try to use tuples to store data which should not be modified. That is the key point. Generally in real cases, we use list as a collection of same type of element, tuples as different types of elements. That is the reason we just make it related. Okay? And anyways, the concept is simple. If you wanted to pass, if you wanted to just access group of elements, you use colon, right. If you wanted to pass, if you give like this, index error, because you don't have any 25th index, right. Now, what happens if I try to create a list inside a tuple? You see, yes, you can create, because you can just access by indexing. A of minus 1 is 1, 2, 3, and you can also do one more technique. A of minus 1, if you try to give like this, again you are violating the rule of tuple. That means you are trying to change the value inside a tuple, which is not at all possible. So, do not do that, but you can do this thing. A of minus 1 of 0, what is A of minus 1 of 0? Go into the list and see what is the value, it's 1, right? So a of minus 1 of 0 is 1 obviously. You can change that, a of minus 1 of 0 is equal to 26. What happens? You see now, 1 will be replaced with 26. There you go. That clearly gives you a change. That makes you different, right? So a of minus 1 of 0, you are changing 1 to 26. It's clearly possible. So you can have a list inside a tuple. That means you are not changing a tuple, you are changing the value inside a list. So that's where the length is remaining same, you are not modifying the length. That's where you are not breaking the properties of the tuple. That is the key takeaway which you should remember always. That means you can always create a list inside a tuple, and also you can also give, suppose what happens if I try to give like this 25, 26. There you go, you can create a tuple inside a tuple also. There is nothing wrong with that. So just always make it simple when you are trying to relate this part. Okay? And anyways, you can also make sure that you try to pass some values where you can also create a tuple inside another tuple, which we have already shown. But how can I pass some value like this? In this way, right? You are just trying to embed a tuple in another tuple. These are possible ways of creating a tuples. Embedding in another tuple. So just make it related, try all possible ways. When you print T, it's simple, but when you print G, what is happening? A tuple inside a tuple again. So length of G is 3, right? Then again you can access with the help of indexing. When you come back, when you just come from back, obviously you will relate it. A of G of minus 1 is 1, 4, 5, 6. Again G of minus 1 of 2, you get 0, 1, 2, it's 5. The same indexing slicing which we have discussed in string, that is the reason I am not repeating again and again, just make it simple to yourself. Slicing, intervals, everything is same. So how do you access in a reverse way and split them? It's up to you. You just analyze them step by step, then only it will be easier for you. Because I gave G of colon 2, you just splitting them with, how do you split them? So this is G of colon 2, you split one element, so you get 4, you don't get 7, you get this nested list. So this is how you create multiple ways of tuple. So let's make sure that we also have one more way where you can unpack a tuple. This is very, very important. We will be again discussing this when we go for a function. Just make sure that you remember this concept. Unpack a tuple within a tuple by using star operator, because star is very, very important. So how do you do that? Let's take an example. X is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and what do I do is I just give y is equal to 45, just star of x. If you give x, that will be a nested tuple. So if I just give x, you get the result. When you print y, there is no nested list inside it. You are unpacking the values. That is the key point, right? Now length of y is basically 5. It's not that, because there is a pretty much different in this. Suppose if you give y is equal to y, or let's keep z is equal to, you keep up some values like this, Saket, and you just give Codegnan, and you keep simple x. This will be a nested list, right? You see the length is, when you go for length of z, it is only 3, but when you go for star x, it is different. Let me take the same example. So when I give the same example, not with single x, but including star. Now it's not a nested thing, because when you go for length of z, it is 6. So these are very, very key important points, because you are unpacking the values from a tuple. So tuples are immutable. You can create a list inside another list inside a tuple, or tuple inside another tuple. You can access the elements by slicing, indexing, and you just go with parenthesis for creation of a tuple. These are very, very important points when you go for tuples.